This is Protocol 1. I'm James Neilson-Watt. If you are successful but not fulfilled, you're running industrial age software on space age hardware. It's time for an upgrade. Don't settle.
Hey John, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. I'd love it if you could jump in to be your backstory. I've got some notes here, but I don't want to ruin the show. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate everything that you do, and then also just are getting to connect back in, gosh, it was like August of 2020 for our very first conversation. I sure appreciate that, and been watching what you've been doing. So it's really cool to be here. So my background. So I'm out of Las Vegas. Do a lot of different things. Started as an engineer long, long ago. Right out of high school, I actually jumped into engineering and worked as an engineer all the way through college. That's how I paid my way through and kind of advanced from there. Business owner, I've been an athlete the majority of my life, professional motocross racer when I was in my teens. So it was actually until I was about 13, and then professional tennis player, taught here in Las Vegas, and I've done some pretty cool stuff in sports, Ironman, and then as far as my life, got 3 kids, one on the way, and currently married to my beautiful wife, Annie, who's having our 4th child, or my 4th child will be her first. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
You said you got 3 daughters, right? Well, will be 3, and
Will
then
be
one
3.
son.
That's
How
right.
old are other than the one that's on the way? How old are the other kids?
So my son is 22. He's in the Air Force, so United States Air Force, and then I've got 20, 11 going on 22, and then the one on the way.
Yeah. I have to ask because I hear different stories. I've got 2 boys, and they're with love, they're mental. My question is, what's been your experience with girls and boys? I've heard things like the trick is to keep the boys alive or stop them from killing someone else, but otherwise they're harder when they're younger and easier when they're older, or something like that. And then girls are easy when they're younger, and then they get harder until they're in their mid-20s. That's what some people have told me. I don't know how true it is.
I've had a mixed experience. So we raise our kids like the exact same from our perspective, and then I've got 3 kids that are completely different. So my son, he grew up, he was very just straight and narrow. He is a rule follower, has been forever since he was born. Like he used to line up his car, little like toy cars, in perfect order, colored order. Is like very precise the way he's always lived. Never been in trouble at all. My daughter, first daughter, she was the wild one. It's like we used to tell a little story like, when they grow up, I could imagine coming home one night and I could just imagine, she's now 20, but she's not like this. But when she was 3, we'd say, she's going to be the one that had the party, and she's going to be passed out on the floor, and he's going to be on the couch saying, "It wasn't me." Right? That was how we experienced them. Today, they are just good kids through and through. As my daughter's much more artistic. My son is very logical thinking, very ordered. And then my littlest one, not the one on the way, but our 11, almost 12-year-old, is super artistic, like off the charts as far as her art. She loves theater and things like that. But again, you raise them all the same, and they still end up different in these ways. We actually say that they're sour, so that'd be my son. And then my middle is sweet, and our third one is spicy with their
Yeah,
attitudes.
yeah, yeah. I got all of my son's friends are girls. It's just how it's worked out. Whenever they make friends, it's always girls. And we'll go to their houses, or we'll play and have play dates and things. Sometimes watching the differences is amazing because we'll invite the boys to come and sit and play quietly, and they just have all this energy, and the girls are kind of coloring or whatever, and like looking at them like, what's the matter with them? Because the boys are wanting to do something and jumping off something, running around, and they never seem to get tired. It's amazing. I said this in a recent vlog. On one hand, there's you wish for an easy child, which can then lead to situations when they're adults, which means they maybe don't have the force to achieve things or push through when people are bullying them, etc. And then you wish for a child that's strong, but then you have to deal with a child who's strong during that time. And so we're in a situation of like kind of leaning into who our boys are and um, looking to support them in learning how to control. I heard this really good concept: control their dogs. I don't know if you heard this before, John, but I think it was on Instagram. I saw it. This guy talked about boys and young men have 2 dogs they need to learn how to control on a leash, which is one is their aggression and one is their sexuality. And if they don't learn how to control them when they're on a leash, then when they go off the leash, when they get older, it can become a problem, right? Lead to fighting and promiscuity and things like that. And so we spend time with our boys to help them reconcile their energy and aggression and force and go, how do we channel this into something constructive instead of letting it just go out? And I know that for me, it was hard because I grew up without a father. And so it was interesting for me to be a father of boys. I had to really kind of find my masculine because I'd always been around women, and I found women easy in terms of female friends, female colleagues, etc. But having friends with men was very, very different. So for me, I had to find that for my sons, but realizing like the father is so important in driving that for these boys so they can not have that immature masculine as they grow up.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for me, it was quite a bit different. So my dad, he was away quite a bit. He's always around. He actually lives across the street from us today. Mom and dad do. But he was driven in sports. And so it was constantly on the go. So I had kind of the opposite experience. It was, I needed to meet dad's standard. And it was a high standard. It was like, if you've seen Talladega Nights, it's like, if you're not first, you're last kind of approach. So in motocross, I'd often get injured because I was pushing so hard to be the absolute best. Like that was the only standard we knew. So that's how my dad trained me. And then what that meant is I couldn't relate to a lot of people. Because if you aren't at your best, I'm like, what? Like,
why aren't you pushing harder?
Yeah, why aren't you pushing harder? Exactly. Work harder.
Yeah. I had a similar thing for me, but for me it was because we didn't grow up with much. There was these stories embedded around life is easier with money, and you need to. The reason that it's hard is because we don't have money, and so you need to go and not necessarily explicitly like you need to go and figure it out, because no one in my family really knew how to make money. But there was this feeling of lack of, and therefore, and so for me, it's this endless drive. And I'm still working on that today. You know what I mean? Like we're doing fine financially, and but I'll still go, yeah, no, that milk's a bit expensive. We'll go get this one instead. To save $1, because my mum, bless her, was trying to make things work, and so we should water down the milk so that the 2 liter of milk would become 4 liters, and all this sort of thing. And it's still in me, and there's some benefit to that, but then it can hurt things too, right? Like I think Tony Robbins gave a story about a guy he knew who was like a billionaire or something, and he would go off at his wife and daughter for spending some money. It was like a few $1,000s on jewelry or whatever, because he had the poverty mindset on the inside. And I think Tony said to me, he's like, dude, you're worth so much money, just like let it go, let your family go on. And so that's something that I wrestle with. We're flying to Thailand next. So we're in Japan, in Niseko, in the north part of Japan for 3 months. And it's sort of a work and ski type thing. So we're in this small town, Puchan technically, and there's like nothing here. So Delcy is less than happy. But I managed to pick up a car so we can now go places. Point of my story is we're going to Thailand next, and I was looking at flights. And I was like, hey babe, found some flights. It's $900. It's VietJet. And she goes, James, do you remember VietJet? And I was like, no, I think it was all right. It's only like a couple 4-hour flights. And she goes, James, there's no TV, so the boys are going to go mental. There's no food on them either. It's a 4.5-hour flight, and your boys are going to go mental. And she said, we're not flying VietJet. I said, yeah, but the next one is like $1,200. And she's like, James, we're just going to pay the money. And I went, these stories we have. So, John, you said you were an engineer, but you're also motocross, tennis, Ironman, and now you're relationship man. Run us through how kind of, obviously the sports side of things, you must have mastered something and said, I'm going to do the next thing. Run me through that. And I'd love to know about the Ironman. That's always something on my list. I'm like, man, that'd be cool. And then it just hasn't been a driving force for me yet. And then run me through kind of that led to some relationship stuff to now where you are, where you kind of teach these things. I'd love to hear that journey.
Yeah. So it is a pretty interesting journey, and it all ties together. So as a kid, as I was sharing, I was right into sports, like out of the womb, get into sports. And it was baseball, soccer, and all these things. I remember my very first race was actually on my birthday when I was 7 years old. Which my birthday is actually next week. So it's 6 days from now, I'll be 48. So if you can imagine, this is 41 years ago. I got on this motorcycle and I took third in this race, having never raced before, which is pretty cool. So like you leave the track with a trophy. It's my first trophy. It was like, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. And so my dad went all in, because that's how my dad lives. He only knows all in. He's 72 2 now. He plays softball 4 to 6 hours every day today. Like that's that kind of guy, right? So when I decided to go all in on motocross at 7, he started pushing me really intense in sports. So my workouts were commonly get off of school, go ride the motorcycle for a couple hours, come home, run for an hour, get back home, 500 push-ups, 500 sit-ups, and then sit on the wall, so doing wall sits, while doing my homework for about 45 minutes to an hour straight. So like I joke, I didn't go into the military because I grew up in the military. It was boot camp, right? But it made me the best. And so it's interesting because I used to have this belief that my dad created, like he didn't give me a childhood, that all I did was work. And so today I work a lot, like we're talking about your experience, right? That we create these beliefs. So I believed that I was only as good as how hard I worked because of that. So it's always about validating like myself through work. So you take that forward, and then I went into tennis, same thing, worked really hard in tennis and ended up teaching tennis at the Desert Inn Hotel back in the day here in Vegas. This is before the Wynn Hotel. And so that was a really fun experience. I would never give that up. Like worked at Caesar's Palace for a little bit also, and got to meet some really amazing people. Continued down that path. I gave up tennis, and I kind of gave up sports because I met a girl. So met a girl, got married. I was 21 years old when I got married. And actually I was 22. She was 21. And that was, the year 2000. But here's the thing. I didn't know anything about relationships. And so we really struggled in this relationship. We were married for 20 years. And we really lacked passion. And a lot of it was because I didn't know how to show up as a leading man in that relationship. I knew about providing, but not about leading, not really even about protecting. And so we can talk a little bit about like what I've learned about being masculine here in just a few minutes. But the next link is Ironman that you're curious about. So I want to make sure we talk about that. So here I was actually on this big engineering project in Central California. It was California High-Speed Rail. And I was the design manager for this one piece. It was like a $2 billion segment. But internally, what nobody knew is I was really struggling. I didn't know who I was. I really didn't like the project. I didn't like the people that I was working. Well, I didn't like one specific person that I worked for. I really struggled with that. I didn't know how to communicate. And I was going through a divorce. And we actually ended up filing 3 times because I was trying to figure all this out. And then there's this moment where I was going home. 2 things kind of happened simultaneously. I was going home one night, and my mom calls me. And she says, "Where are you?" I said, "Well, Mom, I'm on Highway 99 heading home." And it's like 9 o'clock at night. She goes, "That's the same highway your uncle died on about this time of night. He too was an engineer." And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, okay. So in that mindset, I get home and I'm get on my phone, I start scrolling, and there was this Facebook ad for this guy, Tony Robbins. Like I kind of knew who he was from Shallow Hal. I knew like that much about him. And he's giving this intervention to a guy about ego. And I got pissed off because his wife didn't want him playing a band. He wanted to, and it felt like my life. So I threw the phone. I was like, "You should just leave her." And I said something else, but I'm keeping it PG. So anyway, so I did that. And ultimately where that led me was to a Tony event. And it was my first business mastery. And there was this guy, Jesse Itzler, on stage. And he started talking about a guy named David Goggins. And I don't know if you know who he is, but David was super intense, like all in on endurance athlete. And his first triathlon was a double Ironman. Well, I'm thinking, okay, this guy, he was overweight, like severely, got into shape, became a Navy SEAL. If he can do that, like, and he did it in 90 days, I can get in shape for an Ironman. So that's what set me on this path. Is like hearing about this guy, all because I'm going like through this relationship stuff. It led me down this path, and I find Ironman. So then COVID happens. So here I am training, but I can't train because all the gyms are closed. So the only option I have is go outside. And I did my first half Ironman here in Vegas in the summer. It was like 110, 115 degrees, and did this half Ironman. Crashed on my bike like 1 mile in. I'm bleeding as I'm riding this thing. Finished it. And it was just one hell of an experience. I kind of got hooked for a little bit. But what it was really happening for me is I was rediscovering myself, right? Like I was this intense person, I kind of lost that, especially with athleticism. And then this allowed me to push myself to find out who am I really when I'm pushing my body and my mind to the absolute limits. And so fast forward to 2022. So this started in 2020. In 2022, I completed 3 Ironman races and did an ultra marathon in a 4-week period. And so that was pretty intense experience. And then I retired. I hung up the bike and said, that was enough. I think I aged 30, 40 years in that 4-week period, but it brought so much value to me to know who I am when I strip myself down and just be present with myself. Can I take one more step to cross this finish line? And there were moments, like I've got video I'll send you, where I'm doing the like laps around this race. The first lap, I'm all smiles. The second lap, I'm kind of, The third lap, I'm a freaking walking dead zombie, right? Just like trying to get to the finish line, but it was all here. And once I did it, I knew what was possible. So like, if you're going to do it, the first step, and this is what I'd encourage you to think about, is to just fully commit. The first time I tried to do it, I was not fully committed. Fully commit, like all in, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do really, really well. And then go train, because it's 17 to 25 hours a week of training. So you're on the bike, you might be on the bike for 5 to 7 hours, and you'll do one long ride, short ride of 3 hours. You'll run 3 times a week. Your long run will be 4 hours, 5 hours. And you do everything by time, right? When you're out running it, you're not trying to run a distance. You don't train a marathon by running a marathon. You train by running for 3 to 4 hours.
And then the distance just gets further the faster your pace is for that time. Yeah.
Got it.
You don't think about that, hey?
Yeah. It's crazy. Like there's a great book by Dr. Maffetone. It's called The 2-Hour Marathon. And if you really want to do an Ironman, read that book and you'll learn about heart rate zone training. And it's all about just controlling your heart rate. And so if you can imagine how that might apply in business, like being able to maintain calm under a storm, or in a relationship, being able to maintain a level state despite whatever might be going on, especially for a man, so you can provide some certainty, some confidence and safety for our women. Like their emotions are going wherever they're going and you're stable. They can rely on us in that state. And that's a lot of what this experience brought to me, discovering me, being confident, certain. If I can do that, the rest of this stuff is easy.
Same thing applies, like you said, business, your relationship, parenting as well. I see that a lot where I myself struggle or others struggle, and it's got nothing to do with the child, nothing to do with your spouse, everything to do with you. And I think that comes down to this idea that I've been kind of focused on is the radical self-accountability. Everything is my fault, good or bad, in the ways that I can control it, not the things I can't control.
I'm gonna interrupt you because I don't think that serves you to think of fault. Is that okay if I just interrupt you just for a second? Because I appreciate where you're coming from. But fault does no good, because fault is looking backwards and you can't change shit about the past. So all that you can end up with, if we're thinking fault, is shame, guilt. These are not emotions. What I encourage is to actually look at it and say, how am I responsible? How am I able to respond to what has already happened? It's like, so what, now what? This happened. What am I going to do right now? And if we're coming from that point of view, like I'll give you an example. Imagine for a second that you and I are sitting in an airport, okay? And we got our families with us. You've got Delcy, you've got the boys, and I have my kids, and Annie's with me. We've got little Kinsella is, maybe she's, newborn, whatever, right? And as we're sitting in this airport waiting for our flight, a news flash comes up that there's been a plane crash in Zimbabwe. Now imagine just for a second that I'm responsible for everything like you have literally given me full accountability to deal with this. And I start freaking out. Oh my God, like the planes are going to crash. This is going to be terrible. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Where's your stress level as we're thinking about this? And I'm responding and reacting this way, which you would never do, by the way. But under that line of thought, like that doesn't work. If we think about responsibility, what I'm looking for, responsible, saying, okay, this happened. What can we do with this situation to create a very positive experience so that everyone around me, no matter what's happening, like I'm responsible for literally everything on the planet that's happening. It's how I respond. And I do this instead. So, hey, James, Delcy, Annie, this is terrible. There's probably families on board. We're here, like we're stuck for a couple of hours. why don't we put together a quick GoFundMe? Let's raise some money for these families. Let's see what we can achieve in the next hour and a half. Now, what experience do the boys remember? What do they get from that? So that's the reason I look at everything from being responsible. And that it's been the biggest life-changing thing. The reason I wanted to interrupt, because this one thing about being 100% responsible for everything in my life-changing. That has totally cured almost every almost every relationship issue that I've ever had if I'm responsible. I had it today at work. I'm responsible for what's occurring here, meaning I'm responding to it. I'm not at fault. So get rid of the fault doesn't serve
For
you.
context, John, we're on the same page. What I'm referring to is exactly what you referred to in the sense that there are things I can control and things I can't control. And the things I can control, I use the word fault with a different meaning, but I get what you're saying in terms of the priming of that word. It's like when things are happening, if it goes well, there were choices that I made, responsibilities that I took. If there are things that are not going well, there's responsibilities that I have and choices that I took that I can look at and go, that resulted in this. So yes, my spouse might be tired and hungry and could have been nicer, let's say. But I can be responsible for how I show up in that moment. I can be responsible in terms of planning, knowing my spouse to go, she's going to get hungry. So how can we look at making sure that there's food present? Because as an adult, there can be a tendency to say, well, other people should also be adults. My spouse should manage themselves. And I think there's truth to that, but it's not my responsibility to make that person better. It's my responsibility to be better myself, and then in so doing, leading others around me. And I think a lot of people get stuck on that with, like, kids, it's different. It's like, oh man, my kid can't not crap in his pants. He's a baby. I got to change his diaper. But then as we get older, it's like, you should be better. You should. And like I said, you could argue, well, yes, but I think that the key difference is we all can only do what we can do with the blueprint that we're currently running, the resources we currently have. And from my perspective, you could do better, spouse, but that's because of my blueprint and my resources, not necessarily yours. And so in that situation, I'm only going to create suffering for me, create suffering for others. I was at I think it was happiness and the happiness event with Tony, and somebody said something, and one of the speakers said, is this the spouse that you want or the spouse that you have? And then in that moment, you've got a choice. Either you're going to work with the spouse that you have, or you're going to leave the spouse that you have. And I think that responsibility to say, no, I love this person as they are, not who I think that I need them to be, was life-changing for me, not just in relationships, but in all regards. Yeah, so you actually work with couples, right? That's your core business at the moment.
Yeah, if I could, before we shift to that, I love this topic, just what we're talking about, and it might lead us to somewhere pretty cool in conversation of relationships. One of the things that was kind of ringing a bell for me is we go into these relationships and we're looking for people to meet our needs. And that's precisely where the breakdown starts, right? Is, well, I need them to do this so that I feel blank, whatever that. So I'm happy if they do this thing. The invitation always is, how do I meet my own needs so that really it's, what do I want with my partner? What do I want to create with them? And then this is like this part of the development of a relationship. So we'll talk about that in a second, is these 4 seasons and like what's required in these 4 seasons. This first season, springtime, what are we looking for? We're like looking for, and what are we creating? We're creating like a dependency with this person. And what we struggle with is we're independent coming into the relationship. We totally rely on ourselves. And all of a sudden there's this other person there. And I hear this all the time. I'm afraid to lose myself. I hear this. It's like, what do you mean lose yourself? What are you really saying? Well, what they're really saying is, I'm afraid to be dependent on somebody else. And this is like this huge breakdown. And that's why I talk about need, because actually give that up, that belief, and you can have a great relationship. By the way, I made that mistake. I needed Annie to be a certain way for me. And when she wasn't, we had breakdowns. This is what led us down to the path to your question about, like, so do I help people in relationship? It's because I went from a relationship of divorce where I couldn't figure out how to talk to my wife, and then went to another relationship where I was running the same pattern. And I thought, this has got to change, because I desperately want to have a good relationship. And we've put in so much work, James. Like, As you know, I mean, we've done all of Tony's events multiple times. We've read, well, you can't see them all, but there's one little stack of books over here. And it's really wide. And then we got another side, and then we have a whole library and a whole nother office. And it's like mostly relationship books, right? And then we did a couple thousand of other training outside the Tony world. And it all comes down to just this one thing. So you notice I had a strong reaction to fault or accountability I react to. It's because I see so many breakdowns from these words. Responsibility is such a misunderstood concept. I know you get it because you're in the Tony space, but I'm hoping that people hearing this right now understand like what you're talking about is so powerful that when we take full responsibility for who I am, and then also assume that my partner is doing their absolute best. If we assume my partner is doing the best they can in this moment, which by the way varies, right? If someone's like sick in the hospital, we don't expect them to do their best by running a marathon, but we do expect them to be their best with their attitude. Well, that doesn't make sense. But if they're in a great state, they're probably going to have a different behavior than when they're in a bad state. So let's be with people. So to answer your question, yes, I'm in the relationship business. That's a long-winded answer.
You spoke about the seasons. What are the seasons?
Yeah, so this comes from a book called Love's Journey by Michael Gurian. So the seasons are spring, summer, fall, winter, and it's a development path for a relationship. So if you can imagine like springtime, it sounds wonderful, especially when we first meet. This tends to be when there's a lot of chemistry. That's what we're really discovering. Like, ooh, this person, like they look hot, and it's like that early honeymoon phase. It's like, well, what problems do they have? None. Like I think Tony says, like the only problem is maybe you're having too much sex. Like you don't have time for anything else. And I find that amusing. Like that's a real thing. And then we get into this power struggle. There's this element in every season that's tough. And the reason that's important is because if you don't solve this hard part of the seasons with the person you're with right now, you get to repeat it with the next person. You don't get to skip seasons. You still have the same development path. I was talking to a guy recently he's in his 60s and 70s range, right? But he goes springtime to springtime to springtime to springtime. So it hits the power struggle, leaves, starts over. And it's this continuous path. And he's wondering, when do I find peace? So you find peace when you go through the storm. So that's the first storm, is this power struggle of saying, you know what? I commit to you fully. And this isn't I commit if you do blank, it's I commit to you. That is what kicks us into summer, is a full commitment. And for me and Annie, our journey happened really quickly. So for us, it was about 5-6 months. And it happened at the relationship trip with Tony. And the big struggle was a lack of commitment. Like I was all in, and I didn't feel that she was. And she actually had a very brief intervention with Tony and a longer one with one of our Platt brothers. And he was very direct in a way that I had not been up to that point. But when he said it, he was also speaking to me. And it was, if you don't commit to this man and stop pursuing attention from other men, he's going to leave you. And I'm so grateful he said that, because without that, I was going to leave her. He was dead on target with what was going to happen. She committed, and man, it was like instantaneously into summer, and it was enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And then in summer, we go through another breakdown period. It's always hot. It's hot and hard, right? And this one's usually the big one, and it's me versus the world. In this case, it's about me finding me. For men, this often happens in our late 30s and 40s. So you have that to look forward to. All right. And you go through this tough time that Alice Armstrong calls the tunnel. But from a relationship perspective, this is something that commonly happens, is we're discovering, who am I? And both of us, both people in the relationship, are discovering that. And there's these different works that we can do, like shadow work and things like that, can bring out the sides of us that we've been rejecting. If you resolve the parts of you that you've rejected, you can often get rid of a lot of the conflict you might have with other people, because your conflict isn't with them. It's actually with a part of you that you've rejected, which is really interesting thinking, right? So you find yourself in this phase, and you build the second C, compassion. The purpose of summer is to learn compassion for our partner and for ourselves. And that's so critical. And it gets us into this next phase of fall, which is a beautiful season. And it's the season of we. So the season of we're building these beautiful things. We're building an amazing life. We're probably even mentoring other couples. And that's really the phase that Annie and I are in right now. And in this phase, it will be us versus the world. And so no longer are we one, like independent person. We are interdependent couple. We operate everything is together. Like you're very lucky right now because typically Annie would be right here. Can't see my hand. Right here next to me, right? And we do everything together, not out of codependency, but because we just enjoy each other and we feed off of each other and we're able to help more people that way. Now, often the thing that comes up, and this is where it gets interesting to me, is in fall, we've often lost chemistry that we had in the very beginning by this point. Because why? Well, we've been fighting through things. And so we can often lose the attraction as we're fighting these other parts of us and each other and we've been rejecting. And so the goal of fall is to reignite chemistry. And then that's what you carry forward. So now you've got these three components of chemistry, compassion, and then I'm forgetting my second one, commitment, all together. And you head into winter. In winter is, you're coming to the end. And often that's when one partner might pass or maybe go through a difficult health situation. We've got one of our best friends, two of our best friends, because they're married, like they're going through that now. And he has Parkinson's, but they've had a beautiful relationship development. And so they're just so compassionate with each other. There's still chemistry, total commitment, no matter what he's going through. She's, doing what she needs to this coming weekend, actually, to be there with him as he's going through different experiences. And so to me, that's what we're really developing in a relationship. My goal is to get to winter in a beautiful state. That's the relationship journey to me.
How much do you think time plays into that? I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Because, for example, so if we talk about the men's tunnel, and a person can feel like they're in their tunnel when they're in their early 30s, but the reality is they just experience a struggle because the tunnel is time dependent, in my view. It is an existential point in your life where you are realizing that your youthfulness may have gone, your immortality may have gone. You're now realizing, what have I done? Where am I at? There's less life in front of me. Like that, the tunnel is not a struggle as much as it is an existential kind of realization. How much of that do you think, in your opinion, with the seasons? For example, I know that there's an age gap with you and Annie. I'm not sure how old she is, but if she's having her first child compared to, say, she's going through perimenopause alongside your tunnel, etc. What's your view on that with time and then summer versus autumn, etc.? Can you get to winter after 5 years? Can you get to autumn after 3? Or is there like the male tunnel, there's a time thing with it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I totally get it because I had the same question. Tony introduced this concept of the seasons. Date with Destiny 2024 is the first time I heard about it. Wow, that's such an interesting thing. And we're like, well, we're clearly in fall just based on the experience. And so we talked to one of the trainers, John. He goes, well, tell me about your life. And so we did. But before we address that was just the hook, by the way. That's all I'm doing right there. Plant the hook for a second because it's an amazing story. I want to address something maybe more important. I'm going to propose to you that the tunnel is not time dependent. The tunnel is actually only exists in more recent times. It is not something that men went through way, way back when. What it really is a rite of passage, is what I propose to you. So Robert Bly talks about this in the book Iron John. And it's a beautiful story. I encourage you to read it. And he does a whole dissection of this fable about Iron John. And it's about this little boy who comes across this wild man who's in the prison cell. And eventually he lets this guy out when he's 35. He lets Iron John out of the cage. And then he realizes what he did is that he broke his parents' rules. And so he decides to go off with Iron John on an adventure. And that adventure is how he becomes a man. So as Robert dissects it, he says it happens because In tribal days, we had a rite of passage when we were teenagers. And a lot of tribes still do this. That's when a man becomes a man. Today, because of the Industrial Revolution and then the evolution of just our world, we are commonly raised by women, right? So if you go to the Industrial Revolution, prior to that, men would be out on the farm working with dad, spending a lot of time with dad. They learned manly things. Then the men went off to the industry or offices. They weren't around as much, so they got raised by women, taught by women in school. 75% of teachers are women. And then we went through a whole development where women's empowerment and all of that. I'm not saying any of that's bad. It's just a reality that that's different than our natural state. So we've taught men to please women, be pleasers. And from that, then we get into our late 30s and 40s. This is just timing on how it tends to work. And we're saying, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel natural. And that's what kickstarts this thing. I want something different in my life. And we have to create our own direction because our dads likely went through the same experience. And so now we've created something unnatural. So my point is, I would suggest to you that we can actually accelerate that for our young men. And one of the things I'm actually in creation of is that.
I would say, though, that you're not realizing that, like, there would have to be a component to it in relation to time, because, for example, my experience of life, neither of us are 60, but my experience of life at 60 would inherently have to be different because of a collection of experiences, but also the fact that I'm acutely aware of the finiteness of life because I will have lost friends, and I'm approaching an age, I'm experiencing my aging.
Yes.
Whereas in my 20s, I don't have a concept of that other than intellectually, because my body feels good, time feels good, I have no one responsible on me. And so while I agree with what you're saying, I guess my question is that, though, the essence of the change that the person's mind has to go through? Like, my father would be a tired knight, right? I know other men that got stuck in the tunnel and didn't come through. And so, yeah, for point of discussion, to push back on that, what's your thoughts with the point? Because I don't know, are you in your 40s, John? I'm 35.
Yeah, I'm 48. And
Yeah,
so I
so
started
48.
this at 37
Yeah.
is when I started going into the tunnel. But here's the thing. Just consider this just for a second. Living this long is a recent phenomenon. If you go back to see how long we used to live in, say, the 1800s, 35 was old. So if we are to say that you don't go through the tunnel till 40, and most people didn't live to 40, that'd obviously be an incorrect thing. So
Well,
our mortality
just to
might
push
be a
on that, John,
driver.
just to clarify, though, because life expectancy is because of infants dying more than it is humans not living past 35.
That's fair.
But yeah, for argument's sake, yeah, I see where you're going.
Yeah, it's certainly, we weren't expected to live into our 70s, right? It was a much, much younger. And so I wanted to plant that seed with you so we can break the idea that this is a common thing as opposed to a more recent development of the stages of development for men.
Well, I guess you would have achieved less, right? Like you would if people are used to not expecting to live as long, then their view of life, the longness, for lack of a better term, of it would be different. So I guess there's a big cultural aspect to what I should have achieved by certain points, and so there would be because the tunnel coalesces for men around the age of 40 because of an achievement view and a view of like there's less time in front of me than behind me, my youth is gone, would probably accelerate that.
But wait, this is a great conversation. If we attach it to chronology, that means there's no hope of making something different. If we say that we can instead create a situation in order to trigger the experience by providing younger men the experience to pull that out of them in their 20s, then we can actually change society. And so for me, I would rather believe that there's the possibility of intentionally triggering an experience so we could get young men to be mature men at a younger phase of their life. And I think that'd be beneficial to society, because right now what we're seeing is, I believe, the opposite. Less men actually go through the tunnel experience. Not that by the way, I don't even love the tunnel conversation because I think it's kind of a made up thing, but I believe it's an experience having gone through it. And it was really this question, a simple question. Who am I really? Who am I? Me. Not who am I told I should be. Not what did mom and dad expect of me. Not what does society expect of me. Not what does my wife. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What life do I really want to have? And if we can answer that question, let's say when we're 30, would it benefit us to have that clarity at 30 instead of 40? Would it benefit us to do it at 20 and to discover these things and do the work to pull that out? What kind of relationships become possible when we have those kinds of men that have the maturity that men back in the 1800s running a farm or a plantation had to have? It's a completely different life.
I agree with that concept. I guess it depends on whether you can know who you are at 30 when you haven't raised kids, or at 20 if you haven't experienced struggles, the decline of your physicality, etc. So there is a progressive realizing of who you are that we go through.
Now that I can align with. There is a path, is what Allison talks about, right? Page, knight, prince, middle prince, late prince, tunnel man, king, elder. And so if we take that concept and take the years, the chronology, take the order, yes, but throw chronology out, now we can ask a new question. How can I accelerate this process to get the growth earlier in my life? So I look at someone like Tony Robbins as a keen example of this, where I believe he had an acceleration to going through all of this. He found himself a little bit later, but he got into a prince stage early in life. Now, he happened to go into this tunnel phase he was 40. So he was my age when he was going through a divorce. And what he really discovered is he is not the nice guy that he had been portraying. He'd been so busy trying to be a pleaser to everyone that he lost who he really is internally. He lost the true him, and he rediscovered it. So Robert Glover talks about this in his book, Mr. Nice Guy, No More Mr. Nice Guy. This is a core part of the development, and I'm going to suggest to you, and I'm not saying I'm right, by the way. I love the discussion because I don't know that I'm right. I'm just challenging the thought that it's chronology because it's not useful to create a change, right? But what he talks about is really the goal is to get rid of the nice guy in us that's so busy trying to please everybody. Instead, really get clear, what is my life? What is my purpose? What's my mission on this freaking planet? What am I committed to creating in my life? And go create it. David Goggins did a lot of that. By the way, he did it through endurance racing and Navy SEALs. He was an Army Ranger. He pushed himself mentally, physically, emotionally to the absolute max. And I happen to believe that we can trigger that experience in younger men. Do I know we can? No. Do I believe we can? Yes. I've seen it. I've seen men grow in a weekend. And so going back to your core question, which was actually about seasons. So I talked to this trainer, John, and so we've worked with him a lot. He's one of the plant trainers. And I asked him the question. I said, look, here's where we think we're at. And so we told him our story. He said, well, we met as I was going through a divorce. Well, that's pretty intense. I said, yep. And a month later, Annie told her parents that she's dating this older divorced guy with kids. And they said, well, if you keep dating him, you can't be in the family. And she chose to be with me. And so that was this like another intense experience. And then I was trying to figure out how to pay for alimony and pay for child support and moving into a new house. And so there's all this tension. And then I was having some tension in my business, and we're heading towards bankruptcy during some of this. And so you can start hearing the stacking of these problems. And then we had our own emotional breakdowns in the relationship that we were resolving. And then we did all this work, Tony, plus this EQ work that we did in a place here in Las Vegas. And then we coached in that environment. And then we did shadow work. And then I did a men's retreat. And it was like literally nonstop to the point I was doing somewhere around 60 hours a week of just volunteer stuff trying to grow. So I walked him through that and said, now here's where we're at. And he looked at us and said, you're definitely in fall. He goes, don't worry about the timeline. Chronology doesn't matter. Tony's given a generalization to say, generally, this is the development of a relationship. And he said, with certainty, you guys are definitely in fall. And he was repeating back to us why. You face down these stages, massive challenges. These are not small challenges. Like we had this, it was tough times. Like, no, this was like, okay, we're either under the bridge sleeping in a cardboard box or we're going to figure this out. Are you with me on this? I'm with you. Let's go. And so I would propose to you and submit to you that it's not chronology, it's the level of challenge that we go through. Tony's the great example.
Would you suggest then that two people in their early 20s could be in autumn?
I think it's possible. I would need to know the challenges.
Yeah, obviously, but assuming the same sort of story, but they were similar age. Because I wonder, the reason I bring up the chronology all the time is not so much that I'm fixated on the time, but more of what my experience has been, for example, being with Delcy for 15 years and looking at problems and saying, the things we went through, the things we overcame, etc., but then also looking at seasonality of life, because overcoming problems is one thing, and then having children is another. So facing children over time, because I guess my hypothetical for the audience and for you, I'd love to hear your thought, is intensity of problem over a shorter period of time relative to sustained over time over a longer period of time, which breeds the autumn season or the progression together. Because you could go through a cancer issue with someone 2 years into a relationship, but that wouldn't make you into autumn because you're still in a phase of life where you haven't had to deal with their shit for 5 years. And when I say shit, I mean like the ups and downs of personalities and relationships to build a strength of I love this person despite, because a honeymoon phase is because of oxytocin and they can't do anything wrong. So whereas if you'd been with someone for 20 years, maintaining, like, I'll be more clear, if you see a couple who's passionate and it's their first 2 years versus 20 years, the passion is the same, but the respect of that passion is different because there's a seasonality to 20 years of a relationship, 20 years of a person's stuff that we've all dealt with, each other's things in that time. And so my question to you is not that I'm fixated on the time thing, but just for discussion's sake, going through an intense thing at an early stage versus a sustained pressure over time, which of those, in terms of autumn and experience for both, would you say is a strong autumn where you're experiencing the benefits of autumn versus a weak autumn where there hasn't been the time aspect to it? Because as they say, pressure over time. That's the idea that I'm trying to get across. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I appreciate this, right? So you can put a diamond becomes a diamond, right? Because you put carbon under pressure for a long period of time, or you put it into a laboratory experiment, you put in incredible pressure over it over a much shorter period of time, it's still a diamond, right? So just consider that metaphor for a second and ask maybe, can I recreate that in a relationship, which is your core question? And here's what I would submit to you is it depends on if you learn the lesson. Because the lesson of each phase is what matters, not the experience. Did I learn the lesson of total compassion for my partner, for myself, and for others during summer? Did I address? If I did, then yes, you can be in fall rather quickly. That's what I'm submitting. Did I really learn the lesson of full commitment? Not I commit as long as you do what I want. All right. It's a commitment of you're mine, I'm yours. We're in this together. Let's figure this out. Because that's what you really have to get to summer and to be able to make it through. So it's about the intensity, not of the experience, the intensity of how well you learned the lesson. And so for us,
you repeat it, as you said.
You got it. Yeah. So we did this training that I was mentioning, this EQ training. We actually replicated it here in our home. We're doing it here at the end of the month. And we put people through this experience where they get to hear like feedback, real feedback, like they've never experienced anywhere else in their life from people that have no idea about anything about them, but they can see them so clearly because of how we do it. And when they hear it, they're like, and they see themselves for the first time, and then they have compassion for themselves. And so to me, that's the development of men and women is, and by the way, I'm addicted to this word compassion, because if we can just start seeing each other as humans and appreciate the human experience, then we can have an incredible life experience. We can have incredible relationships, not just with my intimate partner, but really with anybody. And we can have peace, I look at the relationship with my kid's mom, Stephanie. And so, she's my ex-wife. We're divorced. I don't like saying ex-wife because that has even a connotation to it. But I'm saying that for audience's sake. It's my kid's mom, Stephanie. And she too went through the same training that we went through. And I remember on the 4th night of this training, she had this big breakthrough, and I had it before that. But she opened her eyes at this graduation. She looked at me and she apologized for how she showed up in this 20-year marriage. She finally had like compassion in that moment for what I also went through. It wasn't just about her. And it's this first time that I felt seen, heard, and understood by her. And then just a few seconds later, and by the way, before this, she was like a big walking middle finger to me and Annie's relationship. But a few seconds later, she walked across the room and hugged Annie the first time they met. And it was a beautiful experience. And that was created because of the compassion that she learned. So that's why I submit that to you. And we don't have to be in a relationship to learn compassion. And so that's the other thing. You mentioned about mine and Annie's age gap, right? So it's 18 years. So it's pretty significant. We have a lot of fun with it on Instagram. At this point, we kind of play with it, right? But I'm more developed on that emotional side, so I've been able to also accelerate her learning and her growth because I've had these experiences that I've been able to share with her. I had grown in my level of compassion. I had grown just from my experience of people. And so that created, again, acceleration. Tony and Sage, same thing, right? There's a bunch of couples out there that have that same experience.
Well, that was a normal experience for all of human history up until recently, was a difference in age. And there's biology to that as well. Like the greatest competition for a young man is an older guy with a car, an older guy with resources. And it's a natural thing. And I think that there is a balancing there. Like if we go back to that tunnel, and let's say a lot of divorces happen around that time, and it seems to be similar aged couples, because there is a tunneling experience and there's a perimenopausal experience. And so there's these two big changes. And because relationships are less committal these days, because we're all able to just leave them, there is no the same dishonor as there used to have been. And there's pros and cons, but there is not a working through of those things to the same degree that they may have forced to be before. Like arranged marriages tend to work out happier than non-arranged, especially in Western worlds, because there's a commitment, as you said, to this must work for the family, not just for myself. So to my point, there would have been with age gaps, there's a naturalness to that too. Like you said, you had been through things so you can hold space, so the dynamic would shift.
Just in being, and you mentioned about being a father. Fatherhood changes men so quickly, right? There's nothing more humbling than being a father, in my experience, and it sounds like yours as well. And so if you take a young man, I was relatively young, I was 25 with our first kid. And then I'm holding this little baby that's completely reliant on me. And I'm trying to train this young man to be. And it's great until they have a mind of their own, right? And they kind of want to do their own thing. And so you get humbled. And so, yeah, I also align with you that that's part of the growth of man is humility. Maybe I need to add that in, is like the individual growth. So here I am entering a relationship with Annie. She was 25 when we met. I was 42, I think. Got to do the math here. 42. And my gosh, had I been humbled through life, like through these different experiences. And whether it was, this project with the high-speed rail when I was on that, or saying, wow, I was so in over my head on some of these experiences, or that I pushed myself to the points of failure. And so lots of humility, or having a conversation. I remember a conversation with a really good friend of mine. We were in a parking lot, and I said something simple to him, but he stops. He pulls the key out of the ignition and says, "You drive." Dude, I'm sorry. I was just like, you missed the turn, right? And he just dressed me down for like the next half hour. Like, it was a very humbling experience in the parking lot of an airport, getting dressed down by one of my best friends. And I would tell him today, I hope he watches this, I'm so grateful to him. His name is Jason. It's one of the best experiences of my life today because of humility. And so I think that's part of the major development of men is humility. And you brought it up in a different way. It's not even humility for you, it was mortality. Mortality is awful humbling.
So I don't know if you know this, John, but I had done Fountain Life with Tony's company. And for those listening who don't know, they do full body workups and CTs and MRIs and blood work and everything like that. It's established as a baseline. Most people who do it are in their 40s plus, at times where they're going, hey, maybe I should take care of my health. And so we're doing it in our early 30s. And they found a lump in my lung, and then I had to get CTs done 5 months later, and then again to check if it's growing. But I had, for maybe 9 months, I had a possibility that I would have lung cancer. Now I took that and said, what story am I going to use from this? And the story I used was two simultaneously in different partitions of my mind. One was the likelihood that it is cancer is low because the presentation on the CT, symptoms, age, health history, etc. And so I said, okay, it's not likely. So there's no point in freaking out. But on the same, the other partition was, what if it is? How can I take more from life because of it? And so for me, I call it a cancer scare. And I live by that. I live by believing that I had, that during that time I was believing that I could have had cancer for 9 months. Because there was a humility and mortality perspective that allowed me to realize aspects of myself. And I don't think we ever fully learn every lesson. I think that's God's plan, is to refine the lesson you're learning. But I like to believe that I took from that as much of a lesson as I could, so that I can then apply that to other parts of my life. So my faith, my family, everything changed for me from that because of the humility that, hey, this could be the case. What can I do with my health now? How can I love more, etc.? Because a couple of years earlier, we had lost a friend from cancer, which is one of the reasons why we decided to sell everything and start traveling, was to go and see more of life. So for this to happen literally 4 months after selling everything, because of that, to then go, I was like, okay, I'm going to learn something in this. But yeah.
By the way, I love that belief that, it's God teaches these, or gives us these opportunities. That's an important refinement. Actually, as I was saying that, he gives us an opportunity to learn a lesson. And then we believe we've learned this lesson. And then in God's infinite wisdom, he tests to make sure we learned a lesson. He gives us an opportunity to confirm. Yep. Okay, got it. And you get a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more. And for me, it's like these micro distinctions on that path. There's the first big distinction of, am I living my life fully? And then it's, okay, what is a full life? Well, what really matters in that full life? If I could only have one thing in my life, what would it be? And so these are these little tiny distinctions along the way. And I this isn't as your cancer scare, like that's a real thing. Finding something significant in your lungs, holy cow, right? Like, freaked me out. I've got these lumps that I started feeling in my belly. And like you, in my mind, I was creating this belief it could be something really bad, right? Oh my gosh, these things are, is that a lymph node? Is like, what's going on? Oh my gosh, it's literally nothing. They're like some fatty deposits. But in my mind, it was scary because my dad had testicular cancer. My mom had skin cancer. My uncle died when he was 52, the one I talked about as an engineer. My grandpa died at 52 from a heart attack also. So I think of these, you know what? Life is really short. I'm 48 now. If I was my uncle, I've got 4 years left. What matters? For me, there's one top priority. And that's, again, the relationship space, really my woman, right? I want to enjoy every possible moment with her. We have disagreements. I've created a little system so that we can get rid of our disagreements in seconds or minutes at least, instead of days and weeks like it used to be, because I refuse to go more than that in a breakdown with her, in a conflict, because those are minutes that I've lost on the most important thing in my entire life. If she calls, I can be in a meeting, I step out, because she is the reason, like, she's all of my energy. She is the fuel that keeps me going to achieve amazing things in life. And we're doing some pretty cool stuff I haven't caught up with you on, like we're helping a friend exit his business right now. And I'm pursuing some real estate stuff right now with a friend of mine. And we've got all these opportunities that are coming out. Well, why? I believe that it's purely because of what we've created in our relationship, because I've made that a priority, and that fuels me. I have infinite amount of energy, unlimited stamina, to keep going when it's hard because I know she's with me. So to me, I think that's the distinctions that you're kind of bringing up. So I'm curious for you, what is your absolute number one if you had to narrow it down right now?
And I'm giving it time because I want to make sure that when I make a decision, it's got to feel right,
And it's okay not to know, by the way. It's okay to think on this, because I think the question is what's important, not the answer. You'll find the answer. The answer will come to us when we stop trying to answer it.
I think the interesting thing with that question is, as a parent, your first thought says, "Are my children important?" But I've done this exercise a lot, John. So for the audience's understanding here, I think for most of us, we go, "Oh, my children are so important." But then you think to yourself, "Well, who would I be without my spouse? If I was like if my spouse passed, who would I be for my children?" It's like, shit, it'd be real hard. I'd have to figure that out. I'd have to figure that one out. Whereas, let's say if my children died, it'd be really hard, but I'd have my spouse. And so then we say, so then what is the most important thing? What's the thing to prioritize? What's the thing that if you weren't able to do the other things, what would affect your life? And so for me, it naturally becomes, like you said, it's your partner, because that's the person that, for me, that's the person you've chosen to go through life with. And your children matter a lot, but they will have their own lives, and they are not mine. Raising them up with my experience and knowledge to raise them into being adults, and that will transition from needing me a lot to not needing me at all to wanting me, because if I've done well, they'll want to be around in the future. And so yeah, spouse is the most important. Delsey's the most important because it's the foundation of everything else. And I think that when you're in a relationship, what do they say? You don't know. What's that song? You don't know what you've got until it's gone or whatever. People don't respect their relationship and the value of it enough until they are on the other side going, "Gosh, I wish I wish I had done more." I saw that with my friend who passed and her partner, and they had a rough time. But there was this moment, and I was watching, and I was like, wow, like these two didn't have a good relationship. When it came down to it, like there was a lot of shit on top of love that was getting in the way. That those two people could have had a much better experience of each other had they had some awarenesses about the labels and the stories and everything else, which I think leans into the work that you do. So if I can, let me ask you a quick question to go full circle. You said there's, what was it, 4 C's? Was it commitment?
3 C's.
3 C's. Commitment, compassion, and what was the third one?
Chemistry.
So you'd say commitment, and we'll loop back. I don't want to change topic too quickly, but I want to make this note here. Commitment from spring, because that is you committing through the storm into and through summer. Is that right?
So commitment is how you go from spring, because we're in this power struggle. The power struggle is really about being dependent on somebody else, saying, "I am so committed to you, I'm dependent on you now." And as people, we tend to resist that because we've had independence until that time. Then we go into summer after we commit. So that might be, moving in together. It might be just literally a commitment. Like, I've chosen this person. We might use symbols of marriage, but I know people that are married that aren't committed, right? So it doesn't mean you're out of spring because you're married. You got to disconnect these things. Did I learn the lesson? Stage 2, summer, is learn compassion for yourself and for your partner. And if you do that, you'll learn it for everybody. Our partner is the one person on the planet that can trigger us more than anybody else, because they're the one that can hurt us, because they can take love away. The love that we want more than anything. So if we can have compassion for that person that can hurt us the most, then the odds of us getting hurt by others greatly diminishes. I can actually feel for them and with them. And then it's about reigniting the chemistry, the passion in the next phase. Some couples keep that, some don't. And that could look different. Just because you're having sex doesn't mean you have chemistry and passion. To me, that's a misunderstood concept.
The transition from autumn to the winter is from compassion, love. I guess, yeah, it goes full cycle again into a new spring, I guess you could say.
In a sense, this final phase is that you have all three. You're a fully developed relationship. You're unbreakable at this point. Couples don't split in winter. They split because they didn't get to winter. So like the gray divorce. These are couples that likely got stuck in summer. So you talked about your dad is, I think you said was it a lazy night?
No, like a tired night. Like
tired night.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. A tired night. So a couple, just because they're old doesn't mean that they had all this development. They could still be in summer after 50 years of marriage. because they're
Because they
still
didn't learn the
fighting like
lesson.
crazy. They didn't learn compassion. I know couples like that. It's sad to watch. Their 55-year anniversary, and they're fighting like crazy about something that happened 54 years ago. Like, let's have some compassion and move on, right? And then other couples that accelerate that, like our dear friends, they happen to be platinum partners as well, so I won't mention them, but I see their development there clearly in winter, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch. It's such a, like, I'm admiring this couple and how they're living life. And there's one thing I want to just circle back to for you, and it's a question. So you got Delcy is your primary importance. So a question for men to answer is, who do I need to be for her? And that's not what do I need to do? Who do I need to be for her? What is she looking for in me as her king? Not to please her. That's not it. Because that'd be the doing. What do I need to do? Do I need to take out the trash? Like, no, that's not it. And I'm going to submit to you that it's having a clear mission, a powerful mission like you have, and how you're helping so many different people with their businesses and how to create wealth. I think that's really powerful, James. And it's very clear. And then you're also helping with LearnSpark and what you're doing with that business. And that's a very powerful mission. And the way I've met Dulcie, obviously, and we've had some great conversations, and I can see how she looks at you. She admires her man. And so for the people watching this later, the question is, who do I need to be for my partner to admire me? This is to the men specifically. Because men say that they want submission, they want their wives to submit, but they don't have a mission. So just consider that maybe for her to submit, which really means she needs a submission or a submission, you need to have a mission for her to have a submission too.
And that's not who you need to be for what they want, but what they need, without an ego assumption of need, but a more of a core need. Because you said like submission, and I know for a fact that a lot of women listening to this are going to go, oh gosh, submit. But I think what's missed in that is that in any relationship dynamic, if there are two leaders, two chiefs, as they say, we're going nowhere. And so there needs to be a decision. Is it in your nature to be the leader or not? Because all of us can step up to lead in moments, but true leaders aren't getting tired in that leadership. It is their nature, to the same degree that someone who's putting on the chief's hat is getting tired. And so to women or men listening to this, are you the chief who's just taken their hat off? Or are you the helper who's putting the hat on, trying to be the chief because they think that that's the cool thing to do, they think that's the right thing to do, but you're wondering why you're always fatigued and tired with that role, and it's because maybe that's not your nature, and that's okay. And I think that's the big thing. We didn't get time to speak about this too much on masculine and feminine, but for me that kind of sums it up really. It's like, what is your nature? And your submission is not, tell me to do everything, because a good woman is going to press their king to make good decisions. But there's an aspect of when we are deciding on what we're doing, the other spouse will follow and support that mission, not handpick that mission.
Do I have time for just a very quick story? Because it's not someone that you know. It's our friend Dolph DeRoos. And so we're really close with Dolph. He actually walked Annie down the aisle, right? And there was this time where we're in business with Dolph and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. This is like 4 years ago. I'm like, I really want to work in the area of relationship because I know there's people suffering and like, I really want to help solve this problem. I went through this. I can help, but I did not speak with this level of certainty. It was more like, maybe we should consider, and Dolph, who he's very clear. Like he knows how he can help people. And so he gave his thoughts. Immediately, Annie felt his certainty, my weakness, and chose to follow his path. And this is actually a breakdown in our relationship. A huge lesson for me. And oh my God, did I feel like emasculated. And by the way, I'm not blaming Annie in the slightest. I'm looking in the mirror with this now and saying, I created that. But it was this breakdown for a year because I didn't have a clear mission and I wasn't able to articulate it. And so because of that, she had no idea how she could add value to the mission. And so to me is submission is how does our spouse add value to our mission? That's the reason I say submission. It's a part of this bigger mission. And that might be leading a certain element of that mission. So you can still lead in submission. So it's not a slave driver and a slave, right? I think we had this misunderstanding of submission. Would love to reprogram that. I think it's the most beautiful thing on the planet when we give clear leadership, especially as men, so that women can relax and enjoy their feminine natural nature. Not all women are this way. So quick disclaimer, I acknowledge that about 20% of women are not this way, 20% of men aren't, but the vast majority are a certain way biologically. We're wired this way. So accept our natural selves, and it's an amazing life when we do. And that's been my experience of like bringing out this masculine side that I had rejected for a really long time. And my wife loves it. So it's pretty cool. And she looks at me, I'm like, wow, this woman like really admires me. It's not even respect. I feel admiration. That's like 1,000 levels above respect. And some men want to settle for respect. So for the women, what I would suggest is admire your man, find something to admire in him, and he'll rise to the occasion. Because that's what men do naturally. They rise to that level, not of criticism. They rise to the level of admiration. So encouragement is the way to go.
Yeah, we see that in our boys too, as young men, 5 and 7. It's what can we admire in them? Because to criticize them doesn't pull the best out of them. And in fact, it's the opposite. And yeah, interesting. I would have loved to have covered a bunch of things, John, but I know that you have a ton of resources that people can check out, things around conflict resolution, masculine, feminine, sticking points in relationships, that sort of thing. And I think those are really important for all of us to look at, but I think as well as a foundation of the pyramid, so to speak, is often we want to go for the self-actualization when we haven't first developed the bottom end. And we've got some concepts around Protocol 1 with what we call the vectors, but relationship is a big part of that. And so I'd love for the audience to know where they can go to get access to some of your resources and check out more of your stuff.
Yeah, you got it. So we're in development of a bunch of different things, but for right now, the best place to go is to our website. So you can check that out at LoveJAAM. That's LoveJAAM.com. Visit us there. There's actually the program. It tells you a little bit about us. Look up our TEDx. I have a TEDx that you can check out on YouTube. And it really goes into what you just mentioned about how to resolve a conflict in minutes instead of days. You can hear Annie's beautiful speech as well about how she kind of discovered herself. And then you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. I think my Instagram is John P. Meng. Annie runs it. So candidly, I'm not big on Instagram. Every post on there is her having fun with my account. Or you can look up Annie Meng. She's brilliant, by the way. So she's a Wharton grad, big business person. And she's also Miss Arizona. I don't think I ever told you that, but yeah. So check her out on Instagram, and more than anything, you can reach out to us, right? So find me on Facebook, send me a message, tell me what's going on in your life, and we'd love to help.
Appreciate you, John. Thank you so much for coming on. And there's gonna be a ton of really good clips that come out of this that hopefully are going to impact a lot of people and just get them to think about things differently. I think that's the key, right? It's thinking about what you're thinking about. Beliefs are just thoughts you stop thinking about is something that I try and live by. So thank you so much, John. I appreciate you.
Thanks, James.
That's this week's Protocol 1. If you want to know exactly where you stand across all 6 vectors, take the free assessment at 6vectorassessment.com. It takes 5 minutes. The truth takes less. Don't settle.